Welcome to the first lesson in Module 3, Planning Who We Want to Be. In this lesson, you will learn how to establish goals and use person-centered practice tools to develop and monitor a plan. Please note that while this training is for providers, people who receive supports, their families, and advocates are welcome to view the training. A person-centered planning training and toolkit for people who receive supports and their families is available on the Adults with Brain Injury webpage. In Module 2, we learned how to take discovery and use it to help a person develop a vision for their future. Take a moment to answer the question on the screen. What must be included in a person-centered service plan? That's right. All the elements must be included in a person-centered service plan. A is partially correct, though. What is important to a person is just as important as what is important for them. Take a moment to respond to this question. What is the purpose of person-centered discovery? Wonderful. Well, if you said that all apply, you are correct. All of these apply. As you recall, we discussed the person centered practices and tools you can use during discovery and when working with a person to form a vision for their future. Now we want to build on that work. What do we do with the information that we gather? How do we develop a plan to take action on what a person wants? Working with the person, you can begin to develop the list of goals and actions that you and others will take to help the person to reach their vision. Keep in mind that the list of goals and actions do not have to include everything. If the person's vision is really ambitious, it may help to take that vision and break it down into smaller, more reasonable goals and actions. Using Map 11 within the Personal Futures Planning model, you can start to identify the actions and the people who will help the person to implement them. You can ask question prompts when working with the person to complete the map, such as, what parts of my vision are most important to me? Or who might be able to help me? Or are there some actions that I need to break down into smaller, easier parts? In this step, you will use the required plan template for the Medicaid waiver, and you might use additional planning tools such as an integrated support star. So let's pause for a moment to talk about setting goals and actions to achieve a person's vision. How do we turn discovery and visioning into a set of goals and actions that are manageable? We can help a person to create goals and actions by using what we call the SMART approach. Since each person is different, there is no one size fits all to developing a plan. Because of this, the goals you help the person to create should be a person centered and should align with that person's vision for their life and for their needs. To develop these goals, start with specificity. Work with the person to describe the goals and the actions needed to strive for the vision or achieve their vision. When constructing a specific goal or action, it's important to identify who is involved and how and when the goal will occur. For example, you could generally have a goal to be healthy, but more specifically, you could have a goal to walk 15 minutes each day, 3 days a week. Both of these are goals, but one is more specific. Next, it's important for the goal or the action to also be measurable in order to support the person to monitor and track progress. So, if we use the same goal specified earlier, that we want to be healthy, we can add measurement to that goal by stating that we want to be healthy as defined by having the ability to walk 15 minutes each day, 3 days a week. By adding that specificity and that measurement, we're more able to monitor and track. Once we have a specific and measurable goal, we can work with the person to ensure that the goal or action is achievable. In order for a goal or action to be achievable, it needs to be something the person is interested in, actually possible, and also challenging enough for the person to grow. It's important to strike a balance between setting achievable and challenging goals, though. If the goal is too easy, there may be a lack of motivation. If a goal is too hard, a person may give up. Using our earlier example, we could set the goal that a person will walk 1 hour per day every day. That level of specificity may be too much for the person, though, so we may need to balance that goal by reducing the measurement. We would also like goals to be relevant to the person. This means that the goal is meaningful and aligns with what's important to them and for them. A person is more likely to achieve their goal when the goal is something they really, really want. Using the earlier example, a person may want to improve their health, but maybe they don't like to walk. Maybe through discovery, you learn that the person really enjoys swimming. As a result, the goal could be written that the person will improve health by swimming 3 days a week instead of walking. Goals and actions should also be time limited. If there's no time assigned to a goal or action, there's often no urgency or motivation to achieve the goal or action. Maybe the person wants to improve their health by swimming each day, but they know that they can't swim each day because there's no one to take them to the indoor pool, or they have a busy job and they just don't have time to get there each day. Whatever their reason, they might want to start their swimming goal as something like 2 times a week with the intent to increase that goal to 4 times a week within 6 months or something similar. Finally, the last component of a SMART goal or action is agreement on the goal or action. All goals and actions should include shared participation and agreement by the person as well as those they choose to include in the conversation. Earlier, we talked about the importance of relationships and how those relationships can help a person to reach their vision for life. Including the people closest to a person in conversation about the development of goals and actions will result in greater likelihood of success. For example, in order for a person to go to swimming twice a week and meet their goal, maybe they need their family or a friend to help them with transportation. To achieve the goal or the action, the friend or family member has to agree to help that person. All right, so let's practice goal setting. Let's give this a try. Pretend for a moment that you meet a young woman named Cindy. She used to work as a computer programmer before her car accident. She explains to you that she really wants to return to work, but she knows that it's difficult for her to focus on programming. You work with her to develop a vision for her life after her injury. Her vision includes a return to work. Her preference, of course, is to return to the computer programming field since that is something that she enjoys. She knows that her ability to return to work fully is probably unlikely, but she's hopeful that she can at least do some work that touches her continued interest. Her husband's willing to help her identify and secure a new job role of some type. So, what are some of the first steps that you can take to turn her vision for her life into actionable steps forward? Take a moment to think about the types of goals and actions that you can help her to develop. Consider specific and measurable ways that those goals and actions can be achieved. And think about how you would include Cindy and her husband in the decision making so that there is an agreed upon approach. You can pause the video and take a moment to open up your workbook and just jot down some of those SMART goals that come to your mind. At least jot down one SMART goal, keeping in mind specific, measurable, achievable, realistic timelines, relevant. Like think of all the things that need to be in the goal within your workbook. All right, so let's practice a bit more. Let's see if you can identify a good or a bad goal. So when you look at number 1 on the screen, you have 2 options here. The first option is, after attending group counseling, I will list at least 2 ways I can reduce feelings of anger. Or the second one, I will participate in group counseling. Which of these goals are better? The first one, after attending group counseling, I will list at least 2 ways I can reduce feelings of anger, is actually a better goal because it is more specific, measurable, and achievable. So let's look at the second example. Which is better? I will attend one job fair in the next 3 months, or I will demonstrate job readiness by mastering employment skills. If you think it's the first one, you're correct. The first one is a little bit better because it is specific, measurable, and has a time assigned to it. When drafting goals, it is important to ensure that goals reflect the voice of the person, is positive and clearly written, is based on the person's hopes and preferences as well as their dreams. Don't forget to create SMART goals, goals that should always be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. All right, so now let's turn our attention to the next step. Planning is all about documenting the goals, the steps, and the supports a person needs to achieve their vision. Once you have a plan in place that includes all actions and goals to achieve the person's vision, it's important to monitor that plan. You will need to work with the person to develop strategies to keep the plan moving forward toward their vision. You can use MAP 12 in the personal futures planning model to help track what worked and didn't work, as well as identify the things that you need to help the person to do in order to keep moving forward. Some person centered tools that you could use to monitor progress also include things like the working, not working tool that's in the middle of the screen or the goal attainment tool that's to the edge of the screen. All right, so take a moment to think about one thing you plan to use based on what you learned in today's lesson. What can you use when working with people in the future to set their goals, but also to take their goals to action? Open up your workbook and take a moment to jot down some of those ideas. In the next lesson, we're going to be focusing on pulling it all together and we'll apply what we learned over time. As a wrap up to the lesson on developing a plan for the future, let's watch a video of a neuro resource facilitator, her name is Patty, who explains how she used person centered thinking techniques to help a gentleman reach his employment goal.
Hi, I'm Patty King from the Brain Injury Association of America, Maine chapter. And I just wanted to share a little bit of lessons I've learned working with brain injury in various settings. Specifically kind of more towards voc rehab or really just helping people feel productive. I find productivity and the feeling of productivity is such an important piece in us really building our coping mechanisms to deal with the stress in life. And it's a part of who we are. We all like to feel productive in some way. So that's important. The case that kind of really put me on this path was one where somebody was really looking for employment, but it doesn't have to be employment. It can be volunteering, it can be making crafts, it can be setting a table. Productivity can really be anything that is meaningful to that person. So the case that really started this for me was a gentleman who had a pretty severe brain injury, along with a stroke and some pretty dense aphasia. So he had a really hard time communicating for himself. And some of the things I found was really just taking time to listen, giving him that time to try to express what he wanted. And as a recreation therapist at the time, I had a hard time kind of seeing that as billable time or as productivity time for me. But what I learned is that was the foundation for everything we did beyond. And that time of just letting him express himself and listening was the foundation of where we went from there. Um, his passion was really in farming. He had grown up on a farm. A lot of his memories were farming. So that's really where we focused. But a lot of the lessons I've learned have been utilized in other situations and can really be generalized. I think one of the reasons I was really passionate to help this person too was as I was growing as a therapist, learning how important productivity is for somebody. Employment's more than just a job. It's a feeling of contributing to a larger goal and feeling like you're supporting others and supporting yourself. And sometimes we need to look at that and step back and say, okay, what would be productive for this? Being productive becomes part of our identity. For this individual, his identity was he was a farmer. That's how he grew up, and this injury had taken that from him. He wasn't able to farm. So for him to be able to have the identity again of being a farmer and going to a farm, and this was an hour to 2 hours a week. It was not a grand amount of time, but that gave him that identity back of being a farmer. It's how we introduce ourselves a lot of times. I'm Patty. I'm a rec therapist. I'm a neuro resource facilitator. That's part of who I am. So when we can give that to someone else, that is a gift beyond any other service we can provide, I think. If an individual doesn't come in with a plan ready to go, hey, I want to get back to work. How do we navigate that? So one of the things I do is have conversations that aren't geared necessarily directly towards employment, but more conversations about What do they enjoy doing? How do they fill their time? What gives them feelings of satisfaction? And start to have some of those pre-contemplative conversations of what could be beneficial to add to their life. Um, and sometimes if you have somebody that's still kind of struggling with that concept, something I've done is have kind of a pie chart where you can divide up the day and assign different times of day, different tasks. And a lot of times when they do that, they'll find that there's these chunks of time that are unassigned. And then we can have a conversation. Okay, what would you like to do with this time? Would this be an opportunity to volunteer? Would this be an opportunity to do some employment? Would this be an opportunity to explore something else? And really start to have those conversations now that you have a visual of how much time that person does have to commit to these things. Thinking about when we talk about dignity and rest, thinking it's not just if something didn't work once, it doesn't mean it won't work again. So really, trying, learning from past experiences, tweaking things to fit that situation can be very beneficial as well. Um, and then if you hit barriers. Barriers are a natural existence for all of us in our day-to-day world. So how can we work around barriers in these situations? For him, one of the barriers was transportation. We live in a very rural area, and he couldn't get a taxi necessarily to go because he didn't have the income for that. Or public transportation was nowhere near his home. So that was one of the barriers we had to figure out, and we had to really work that one for a long time and think about, those normal answers didn't fit. That front door didn't work. So how can we figure this out through other doors, through other entrances to get transportation? And that sometimes meant networking with volunteer transportation that looked at using his natural support systems, that looked at using potentially non-motorized transportation, like a bicycle, and ruling things in and out based on his situation until we found something that would fit, even if it was temporary. I was blessed with the time to get to know him. I was able to have those conversations. I was able to not assume what he wanted or why he wanted. I could take the time to talk to him, figure that out, use alternative communications methods if I needed to, and really figure that out. We were able to meet with the farmer that owned the farm and set expectations, have those conversations, and build his goals around that, his therapeutic goals. So he has the goal of being a farmer. I, as a therapist, need to figure out how to make those goals work in his care plan. And all of those conversations with everybody as a team made that happen. And the farm staff was very good at giving him positive feedback and meaningful praise, which were all so fulfilling to him. And what we saw as a result of this was he went from somebody who was very unmotivated in his therapies and was barely staying, active in his care plan to somebody who was excelling. He started verbalizing way more. He started engaging with staff, with other residents.
Finally, thank you for attending this lesson. These are the references that were used to create the content for this lesson. I look forward to your participation in lesson 2.